morning, everybody. Okay. Seems like I have sound, so we're good to go there. Good morning. Everybody excited to learn how to do some hemming today? I know it's such exciting information today, but you know, it's always good information to learn. How was everybody's evening? The rain held out long enough for me last night to get long arm delivered. So it's delivered and we'll go back on Sunday and start full installation. So that was nice of Mother Nature last night. So I appreciate that. I really didn't want to be dragging it in the rain. So, good morning. Hope everybody's got their breakfast, their coffee, their tea. I've already had my breakfast and glass of orange juice. Now I'm ready for caffeine. Can't wait. After I finish with you this morning, then I get caffeine. Good morning, Grady and Layton. Mimi loves you. You gonna learn to hem this morning with us? I can put you to work. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Miss Joanne. Good morning, Miss Joya, Miss Kathy, Miss Kathleen, Miss Carol, Miss Elisa. Did you get your software installed, Miss Elisa? Or is that a project for today? Good morning, Miss Jackie. Good morning. One more minute and then we're gonna get started because I have a lot to show you. I just don't know when to stop. I just keep adding more and more things to show you this morning. So I always like to make sure that I pack it full of information and just make your head swell full of knowledge is my goal. Get my shoes off so I'm ready to Good morning, Miss Annette. I hope you feel better. I hope your injury is not as bad as we thought. So hopefully just some rest and off your feet will help fix that ankle. All right. So this morning we're going to talk about hemming. I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I have a couple of different ways to hem because, you know, one way is just not enough. We need to know multiple ways. We're going to cover some different feet and techniques that can be done not only on sewing machines, that can also be done on overlockers or sergers, the other word for it. Specifically, obviously, we're going to be talking about the world of Bernina, but these feet and techniques apply to all brands that are out there. It just happens to be the one brand that I have here in the store that we love and cherish. So if you don't own a Bernina, that's okay. Come see me and then I can get you owning a Bernina, especially today with 72 months financing, interest free. I can help you out there. But I know that these feet and techniques are timeless and travel across multiple platforms. So you'll be just fine. So this morning, okay, let's get a new share here. Let's change over to the sewing machine. So bear with me as I get things changed. All right. We're going to start with finishing the raw edges of something, because if you are going to hem and you don't own a serger or overlocker, you will want to finish the raw edge. Now, most of you would know, just take a zigzag and finish the edge. That way it doesn't continue to ravel. You can go away now. So we're going to start with looking at foot number 2 or 2A, depending upon the machine that you have. 2 is 5.5 millimeters, 2A is 9 millimeters, but it really works the same. We're going to be using on a Bernina, it's going to be stitch number 3. It looks kind of like mountains or teeth. It does a straight stitch and then it does a jump and then it does a straight stitch and a jump. It looks very similar to what you'll see in a little bit for a blind hem, but it does go the other direction. Now, the thing to know, I forgot to put my freehand system in. Give me 1 second. The thing to know as well is that on foot number 2, there is a little tiny pin that lives right here on foot number 2. And we're going to put the raw edge of the fabric at the pin, not at the back edge of the foot, okay? So with that, once we get, this is gonna make a funny noise because I forgot to sew with it before we started here. We're going to, you're gonna see it's gonna take stitches and jump and then stitches and jump. And when it jumps, it's gonna jump off the edge of the fabric and it's gonna meet the bobbin thread there. Very similar as to what a overlocker would do with the upper and lower looper threads meeting on the edge. Okay, so let me get to the end here. Okay. Cut my thread. And so this is going to give you a similar look to what you could find on a overlocker. And it's just going to give you a nice straight and secure edge for you on your hem, okay, before you fold up. So that's the overlock, overcasting foot number 2 with the overlock stitch on the Berninas, which is, I believe, number 3 for almost every machine. Now, once we finish the edge, we would then be ready to blind hem. Okay, so if we're gonna start with blind hemming, because I would cut my fabric off, I would finish my edge so it was nice and finished. Okay, and then I would move to getting my fabric ready for blind hemming. When I'm going to blind hem, the first thing I'm going to do is press my hem up, okay? And I want to get a nice good press on it. So with blind hemming or with any hemming, I use a hemming ruler. Dritz makes one that's metal. This one is like a heat resistant fiber that I would, if I was going to turn this up, let me flip this around here, and I would get this position and be able to measure up. And I would, if I was going to do a 1-inch hem, I would then fold this and position this so that I could be folded up at 1. And then I would iron right over top of this. Now, when I say iron, we're really just pressing. You do not want to rub your iron back and forth here because that could stretch or skew your fabric, especially if you're working on a bias edge in this area. I use a little bit of steam. So I steam press, and then I usually use, not maybe so much for this. This is like a real thin quarter right here. But if I was hemming something fairly thick, once I finished pressing with steam, I would set, this is, you can see, this is a wooden clapper, okay, that I set on top of my seam while my fabric cools, okay, and that will allow, it's going to keep the fabric from wanting to unfold. It's really going to keep it nice and taut and folded flat for you. When I'm going to blind hem, I always baste my hem in place. So I'm going to fold my hem up where it was ironed, and I'm going to baste the presser foot's width from the edge of the fabric. So I would take my straight stitch, make it as long as I can get it in stitch length, okay? And I would use I'd usually use my number 1 foot. I'd put my number 1 foot on the edge of the finished edge of my hem, and I would stitch a baste to hold my hem in place. I don't like pins, and basting a hem in place will make folding a blind hem easier to do and to understand, okay? So it really doesn't matter what thread color you use because you are gonna take this baste out when everything is done. After you have your hem basted in place, what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab this little seam allowance that we created with the baste. We're gonna lift up on that and we're gonna fold back the rest of our garment, okay? And I'm gonna flip it over, okay? So there's my baste. I'm gonna fold my garment back over my baste, okay? And get my thread out of the way here. Now I've switched over to foot number 5. Foot number 5 is your blind hem foot, okay? It's its one and only purpose in life is to blind hem. We're also gonna switch the machine over to a blind hem stitch. And blind hemming looks just like the overlock stitch, except it goes the opposite direction. It jumps to the left. So what we're gonna do is the blind hem foot has a guide that runs what gives the appearance of being down the middle. I'm gonna butt the guide up against the fold of where I'm folded back over the basting stitch. So what's gonna happen is the straight stitches are going to end up in this seam allowance and it's going to jump over and just pinch the fold. So our goal is to just grab the fold. We don't want to go too far in because then the farther we jump into this section of the fabric, the more of the thread that you could possibly see on the front of your garment. And the whole purpose of a blind hem is for it to be blind and for you not to be able to see it. So the default width setting on your blind hem is just a default. You may need to adjust it based upon the thickness of your fabric that you have on, that you folded over and things like that. So I'm gonna start sewing and I'm gonna watch it jump over and then I'm gonna make adjustments to the width of the stitch, okay? And to see if it needs to jump more or less, okay? So now I'm stitching here and then it just jumped over and I'm gonna increase this width just a 10. There we go. Keeping that blade in the ditch. I have white thread in. I would typically, this has got a print, so white would probably be fine. I would probably do this in pink thread. I'm gonna stitch. Now, if this was an item that was circular, you would go all the way around until you came back to where you started. And I typically go a little bit past where I started and then I tie knots. There's the straight stitches that are done in the seam allowance, and then there's our little tiny jump. And the goal is to just pinch the fold ever so slightly, so that when we fold this up, and like I said, I did this in white thread so that you could see it, or it's actually gray thread. There is the little tiny pinch that is now going to hold this hem in place. Okay, so if that was pink thread, you would never see it. And then you can carefully remove your basting stitch to then have your fabric held in place. Okay, and so that is how you blind hem on a machine. Okay, I'm on a Bernina 790, so it's going to be stitch number 9. Some of the older Berninas, it could be stitch number 7. Okay, so let me back the camera out and I'll show you pictures. This is what the blind hem stitch looks like. Okay, so when you look at it, it stitches down and it jumps to the right, to the left, and then stitch down, and then you would see it jump to the left again. Okay, it's gonna be 7 or 9 depending upon the machine. In newer machines, they've split the triple straight and the triple zigzag. In previous machines, these two were the same stitch, so everything is kind of shifted. Number 3 here, this is the overlock stitch. So you see how it goes the opposite direction, it jumps to the right. So the two of these are very similar. It's just one jumps one way and one jumps the other. Okay. So that is your blind hem and your overlock. And I'm going to slowly move this back down, not to make anybody motion sick here. Okay. So that's blind hemming. See, I didn't even break a sweat doing it. Okay. But trust me, if you'll start doing it for a job, you'll be breaking lots of sweat doing them, because then you're cutting into clothing that's not yours. And that just, I always fear making things too short for somebody. And after you've cut it off, it's really hard to add it back. Okay. Now, let's talk about hemming jeans. Okay, for a moment. So let me change some thread and some feet. So when I hem jeans, I typically use foot number 8 and a straight stitch. Okay, this is foot number 8 is a jeans foot. You could do this with foot number 1. You could do it with your 1/4 inch foot. What I like about it is the bottom of the foot on number 8 is smooth. So it's designed that way so that it can not grab a hold of or get caught on any of the extra lips and things that are on your jeans. And then things get caught on the bottom of the presser foot and they don't flow the way that you want. When I sew jeans and hem jeans, I typically do so with thicker thread. Okay, so if you want it to look similar to what the thread that was on there, you're probably going to want to look at a 28-30 weight on top and a 40 weight in the bobbin. That will help just kind of keep things nice and consistent, especially if you're trying to make sure that you match this, the thickness that you see running down the side of the pant leg. Now we double fold. Now I double folded. Now, depending on you, you could single fold this up if you didn't have a lot of room to hem. I did do a double fold so that I can show you how to be able to jump up and over this bulk that's going to appear. With this, I did fold with the hot hemmer and pressed it with a little bit of steam and then put the clapper on it. And you can see how well that 2 layers of denim is staying exactly where I need it to be. And I don't need to, I don't need any pins or anything along that lines. Now, yes, I know this is a flat rectangle. It's not a small pant leg. If you were working with a small pant leg, you could take your tray tables off and use your free arm to slide the pant leg over so that you can freely stitch something that is in a smooth circle. You are going to want these pieces of plastic, okay? These pieces of plastic came with your Bernina, and they are called height compensating plates, okay? Many of you probably have no idea what they were and may have even since misplaced them. These are designed to help us get up and over this bulk that's in the middle, okay? That if you've ever sewn over a giant bulky seam, usually you're gonna get Your machine's going to make a funny noise. Your stitching's not going to look as pretty, that type of thing. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I always sew my hem with the wrong side down on jeans. So I'm going to keep the edge of my fabric right here at the 5/8 marking so that I can keep myself, oh, gotta tell it what foot I got on. I can make sure that the right side of my fabric is up, and so the good stuff that counts. I'm going to, let's make that stitch length just a tad bigger. I'm gonna start sewing until you'll see that the foot will start to go up kind of at an angle right there. See how your foot's starting to climb the mountain? When that happens, typically your foot's gonna really go at an angle. It's gonna deflect the needle. And so sometimes you can break a needle because the needle actually comes down into the back of the presser foot. You can, this is where your needle can't get to the right height for your bobbin to be able to pick up, and that's why you get terrible, terrible noises. So we're going to take the height compensating plates. You can use 1, 2, or all 3 of these, depending on how many you need to get your foot to level out and be straight. Okay, so once my foot is leveled out, I'm going to sew. Okay, I'm going to work themselves off. I usually do kind of bring these out to the front. When you move your height compensating plates to the front, you need to make sure that you move it as you sew because they're going to sew towards it. And I'll remove them when the foot gets off from being in tilted up, and then I can finish sewing. So you can see there was no terrible noise. There was no gasps. There were no broken threads. There were no broken needles. And I have a nice hem that goes all the way across. This was done with a triple straight stitch. And for a time at this point, I only did this with a single straight stitch. But overall, you know, this is down around your ankles. This will give you, and then there's the back side. Look at those beautiful stitches, no skips, no loops, gorgeous. And so these little guys are going to be your absolute lifesaver. And I use them not just with jeans. If I've got purses with bulky seams, I've got stuff, anytime this foot is kind of lifted and not flat and level, these are where these are gonna come in handy, okay? So they are your best friend, especially if you're going to hem jeans, okay? So that's how you hem jeans. Again, I didn't even break a sweat. I still have my sweatshirt on. Not making me nervous here this morning. Needle size for jeans, the one that I have in right now was just a standard 80-12. I would, and I have a, what thread? This is 30, this is 28 weight thread. It worked fine. If I was gonna do a triple stitch, I would probably put in a jeans needle, probably a 90 jeans. Okay, this is a Microtex 80. That would, is what I would use. I would use a jeans needle, a jeans 90. I just didn't change needles here this morning. So let's see if I have, nope, those are my needles. Nope, those are next. Those are my double needles. I had too many needles, ladies and gentlemen, too many needles. Yeah, so I would probably use a jeans 90, which I don't have in the package at the moment, and even a 100. It just depends upon the thickness of your jean, really, to be honest. You know, jeans come in a variety of weights and thicknesses nowadays. So, you know, I would always start with a probably a 90. And if you feel you need to, if you feel it's working a little hard to get through, or something along that lines, then I would increase your needle size. But make sure that you're using a thicker thread when you go to this 100 or even the 90 needle. The jeans needles are the eyes and the grooves that run down the front of a jeans needle is going to be much larger than what you would see in the needle that you typically sew with, because they are designed to be sewn with thicker thread, because that's what we would use to top stitch and assemble denim with. Okay. The little plastic pieces are called, we call them in our world called height compensating plates. There's a product out on the market that's called a Genamajig. So it's the kind of the same concept for that. Miss Kathy, I went to a 3.0 stitch length when I hemmed the bottom, but I just was trying to match the stitch length that I did here, and I'm pretty sure this was 3.0, but I had done this on Thursday and didn't make my notes. So I just kind of, whatever the jeans may have been hemmed here, I try to mimic the same stitch length across the bottom. But again, don't stress too much over it, because people aren't going to be laying on the ground looking at your ankles while you are wearing your nicely hemmed pants. Maybe they will be, I don't know, but okay. So now that we have that, I thought I would talk about a double needle. Okay. It's been a while since I've talked about double needles or taught double needles. So I thought I would teach you how to get the look of a hem that looks like what you would find on the bottom of your t-shirts. Okay. So if you have to hem knit shirts, if you looked at your hem, it probably looks like this on the front and it looks like this on the back. Okay. We're not going to be able to get this look on the back from a sewing machine, but we can get the appearance of this on the front. And that is done with a double needle. Okay, so double needle, let me get it out of the package here, because I did, I put it in the baggie. You're going to need 2 spools of thread, okay, is the first thing. And a double needle is a single shank, so it looks just like the needle that you would put in your sewing machine. Okay, so it's got a single shank, but there are 2 needles coming off the end of it. Okay, so double needles come in a variety of sizes. Those sizes, not only do they come like 80s and 90s, but they also come 2.0, 2.5, 4.0, that type of thing, which you see right there in the package. That is referencing the distance between these 2 needles. Okay, so this is 2.5 millimeters between the 2 needles. Okay, now when we go to use the double needle, we need to thread the machine twice. Okay, so I am going to thread the machine with one of my spools laying down, and then I will thread the machine with one of my spools standing up. Okay. The only thing that we need to pay attention to when we thread the machine twice, they're both going to follow the same path. Okay. No special changing of thread, and I'm going to get it threaded, and then I'm going to talk to you about what I did. First of all, after if you're going to use a double needle, your needle threader is not going to work. Okay. So that is number 1. For my 830 owners, you're going to need, and 880 owners and 820 owners, you will need to tell your machine that you're using a double needle, so that when you hit the needle thread button, the machine doesn't swing over and try to thread those needles, because it's going to break. For my computerized machines, you probably have a security program. Okay, the new series 5s, 7s, 8s, 730s, 630s, 640s. We probably you have a security program on your machine that you can tell the machine that you are using a double needle. It's not going to be as important here to use that security program because we are only doing a straight stitch. But if you were going to do a decorative stitch with this double needle, then we need to make sure that, it's there, give me 1 second. Pull one out from there. You want to make sure that you do the math to make sure that the needle doesn't swing too far left or right to hit your actual stitch plate. So you would take, if you don't have a security program, you take the width of your stitch. So the maximum width of your machine would either be 5.5 or 9 in the Bernina world. You subtract the size of your double needle. So if it was if you had a 5.5 millimeter machine, you're using a 2.5 double needle. That means that your stitch can't be wider than 3.0. Okay. So if you have a security program, we go tell the machine that we put this needle in and it won't let us do it. All right. Let me just slowly move the camera here. Okay. This point right here. Okay. So I have the machine threaded twice, standing up, laying down. The one that is standing up is coming through on the Bernina, is coming through this little metal guide. Okay. And then they're both coming to the back, first tension, then we're coming forward. Okay. When we come forward, there is a metal disc here. Let's see if I can get it to focus enough. That right here, this little piece that's moving. The thread that is going to go in my left needle, I want to go to the left of that disc, and the thread that's going to go to my right needle, I want it to go to the right of that disc. Okay. By splitting that disc tension, you just can get a little bit better tension on the two needles. And then it follows the same exact path the rest of the way down to the machine. Here is my security program. So I've told it that I have put in a 2.5 double needle. Okay. So basically it's telling me right now, because the last foot that I had on was foot number 8. The stitches are red because they can't fit in that foot because that foot is a straight stitch foot. And so I'm going to put a foot on, and then I'm going to tell it what foot I have on, and then my stitch will come back to being white. If I added width to this stitch, it will keep me from going any wider than 6. So I'm still turning my knob over here and nothing is happening because 6.0 is the maximum width of that stitch. So we're going to come back down here. Sorry for all the moving. Couldn't figure out the easiest way to do cameras today. I have my hem folded up here and I'm going to sew. Now with t-shirts, you don't technically need to finish the edges of the cut that you cut off because they're not going to, for the most part, t-shirt and it's not going to ravel. Okay. I'm gonna just sew here. Let's get that thread that's caught. Nope. So you hem, and then you could come back with a pair of scissors and trim off the excess. Okay. So I've got my 2 rows of stitching here, and on the back, I've got a zigzag. I would then take a pair of scissors and I could come right along and cut out the rest of this excess up to the line of stitching. Okay. I would probably on this, I can feel a little bit of there's a little tunnel going on. So I would decrease my upper tension to help relax the pull between those two needles. So it's sharing one bobbin. So that upper tension, we're gonna decrease to help bring this to be a little flatter and not quite as raised, but overall it would be fine on that. So that's using a double needle to hem. So on a t-shirt, it's closer to a 3 or a 4 double needle, but you can always take your double needle and lay it on top of the t-shirt and check the width. I just used stitch number 1. It wasn't even a fancy stitch for this project, okay? So just stitch number 1. You could use a zigzag, like I said, you could use any stitch with the decorative, the double needle. Let's see if I can find where I laid my needle at. I'll show you how to do that on a overlocker here in a few minutes. I don't want to move the camera away from the sewing machine quite yet, but we'll come back to it. All right. So let's talk about if this is, you just want a simple, you just want a simple hem. You're just going to turn it up, finish the edge, turn it up and top stitch it. Doesn't need to be anything fancy. You just want to take this, you want to fold it up and top stitch, or maybe you want to do it twice depending upon your project. And you don't really want to work with pins and you really want it to be easier. That type of thing. I'm sewing on a 790 at the moment this morning. Okay. Correct, Miss Joanne. No special stitches for a double needle. You can use every stitch on the machine with a double needle. You just need to be mindful of your stitch width. And if you set up the security program on the machine, it will kind of do all of that math for you and keep those stitches within the range that double needle size is capable of. Okay. I'm going to show you how to use a product called Iron Infuse. Okay. The Iron Infuse is a fusible thread. You could use it for in the bobbin when you go to put binding on. Okay. And then you can turn it over and then iron your binding in place before you machine sew it down if you want to machine sew it onto the back of the quilt. I use it in a hem. There's lots of, you can use it for applique. There's lots of things. The Iron Infuse is from Wonderfill. We have it here in the store. The one thing you need to do about Iron Infuse is that it needs to go, if you wind this on a bobbin, it needs to go in a baggie with this so you don't accidentally think it is regular thread. Okay. So make sure that you keep this and your washer, your rinse away thread in a separate location than your other sewing threads. What I did is I took this to my overlocker and I put this in the lower looper, okay? Or if you run a sewing machine, you would put it in your bobbin and you'd run a zigzag. I just ran a simple 3-thread overlock along the edge with the Iron Infuse, what would be on the wrong side of the fabric. Then you fold this up and you put an iron on it, okay? And it is fused in place, okay? So it is repositionable. We can pull on it and remove it. It's not a permanent fuse. So this is not gonna be a permanent hem, okay? This is not stitch witchery by any mean, but it will hold it in place so that you can do your basic hemming without needing any special needles or clips. It's going to help you keep a nice straight hem in that aspect, and then you can just sew it. you can just fold it over and sew right down close to the edge. I typically, you can find, I find usually it's someplace on my stitch plate to match. And then we have the ability to move our needle positions on the machine. So I would move my needle over until I was as close to the edge of it as I could, but also it was something that's going to help me stay straight, because I don't want to be, I don't sew from this side. I mean, you can, but then you have to have a bobbin that matches both sides and things like that. So I usually move my needle position because we can. And then you would just stitch, and that would just be a quick turn up hem for a project. So the iron infuse is really great for that and for holding things in place as well. Okay, questions about that? The next thing I'm going to talk about are hemmer feet. Okay, and I'm going to tell you now, they're not my favorite. So hemmer feet come in a variety of sizes. As a quilter, you wouldn't need a hemmer foot. If you're doing garments and things along that lines, you may find, especially if you do a lot of evening wear, bridal gowns, prom dresses, things along that lines, that you may need it. I'm going to load the machine because I'm going to use very fine sheer thread. I am also going to use fine fabric. I'm also going to use fine thread, because you don't want the thread to be so thick and bulky in your hem that it doesn't lay nice. So the hemmer feet are designed to roll over the hem twice for you, okay? And I'm going to use a straight stitch. Some of the hemmer feet can do straight and only, and then some can do straight and zigzags. Now I have starched this, okay? So the more body that you can give this, the easier it's going to be for you to work with, okay? I'm gonna, okay, yes, I'll tell you what foot I have on. I'm gonna pull my bobbin thread to the top. The foot that I have on right now is the 69, which is the shell hemmer. Come here, bobbin thread. I'm going to bring both top and bobbin thread up to the top. I'm going to put the fabric underneath the foot with the, let's turn this around so it's actually the straight edge of the fabric that I cut. Maybe straight. I'm going to put the fabric underneath the edge of the foot, okay, and line up the edge, and I'm going to hold my top and bobbin thread. This one is 69, but we have hemmer feet that go from 61 all the way to 69, depending upon the size and the type of stitch that you want to do with it. I'm going to take a few stitches directly into the fabric, and then I'm going to bring that out. I'm going to grab both sets of thread, and I'm going to use this to get to roll and help load this foot. Okay, now granted, your top and bobbin thread would be the same color. I just grabbed two colors. And then I'm going to sew. And I'm just gonna kind of keep my fabric kind of folded and rolling as it goes into the machine. You can move, with this particular foot, we could move the needle left and right to get closer to the edge. I'm telling you, this is not my forte. It does take practice with this more than anything, but I'm not going to force you to watch me. It is going to fold your sheer lightweight fabric over in hopes it's going to fold it twice. I think it only caught this one once, but it would fold it twice and tuck the raw edges in. I need more practice. This is too large for this fine fabric, but this is the only hem or foot that I had in my possession. So let me grab a piece of cotton fabric here. Let's try this. You have to, let's try this again. Balance that up. I do a foot. There we go. Amazing what you get when you use the right fabric. Yeah, all the hemmer feet are currently out of stock. Okay, so the system's gonna fold it twice and top stitch for you. Okay, so you want to make sure with these that you use the right size for the fabric and the fabric thickness that you are using. Remember, change this. The big book of feet, okay, that Bernina puts out, the hemmer feet are all in here in one chapter, okay? So we have 61, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 68, and 69. The down the bottom is your explanation as to size and what that foot can do. And then you have detailed information as to how to do those particular techniques. Yes, it's a great tool for hemming napkins. The sturdier the fabric, the easier it is in that aspect. So it just takes some practice, okay? There's videos and techniques out there on how to use those particular feet and videos in that aspect. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, one last thing here this morning, I'm going to show you. I told you I would show you that hem on a serger. The serger that you would need a serger that does a cover stitch. Okay, that's what that t-shirt hemming that you find on your knits that you buy at the store is done with a cover stitch. Not all sergers do cover stitches. Okay, so we have in the world of Bernina, we have the Burnett 42, which is a cover and chain stitch only. We have the Burnett 48, which does both cover, chain, and overlocking. And then we have the L890, which will do cover, chain, and overlock. That's out there. So let me stand up here. Let's change camera. All right. So we have, I've set the machine up. We have 2 needles in the machine. I have a fairly wide, what we call a 3-thread wide cover stitch set up on the machine right now. I have 1 thread threaded in the cover stitch looper underneath of the machine. I have 2 needles in, and like I said, they're set up wide. I could do a narrow by moving the needle over. I could also do a 3-thread cover stitch by adding another needle in the middle. I'm going to line up my fabric so that I know here, if I line it up at this one marking, this needle is pretty close to the raw edge of my fabric. Okay. We are going to talk more next weekend about sergers and overlockers and what they do. Okay. Typically, we always start with our needles in the down position. And with cover stitching, you always start and stop on fabric. Okay, this is not something that we can stitch in the air. And I'm just going to guide my fabric, keeping it lined up on the other side. Okay, till I get to the edge of the fabric. I'm going to raise my foot, raise my needles. I'm going to pull. I'm going to take one more stitch to release. Pull that out. Let me just get my scissors. I didn't leave a long enough tail and I don't want to pull. Okay. And then what we have is there's the stitch on the front. There's the stitch on the back. And if you line it up well enough, you will get this raw edge could completely be caught inside of the cover stitching. I could very easily go back and take a pair of scissors and trim this off as well and trim it flush if I wanted. But that is a 3-thread cover stitch on an overlocker, okay? And so if you do a lot of knits and things along that lines, you may want to think about getting yourself a machine that will do a cover stitch. But it's not necessary all the time, like I said, because you can do this technique. A modified version of this technique can be done with a double needle on a sewing machine. Okay. Do I have any other questions? Because that's the basics of hemming and should cover all of your options for hemming. If another use for that iron fusible thread, if you're trying to baste a curved hem, you can use the iron infuse in your bobbin, run a basting stitch, pull the curve, gather it slightly so that it hems, that it gathers up and lays flat. And then when you iron your hem down in the curve, you won't need 100 pins, and your underside of your curve will look nice and not all messy. Okay. All right. Well, I hope that everybody has a great day. Maybe you'll go hem something today, but break it up. One thing a day. Don't go crazy in the closet and start hemming everything. But I hope that was a little bit informative and a little bit helpful, especially if you've been struggling to get pretty stitches over thick seams like jeans and things like that. It's also, those height compensating plates are also perfect for getting up and over elastic in face masks and pleats that we were dealing a lot with at the beginning of all of this back in March and April. That's where a lot of people were struggling to sew up and over those layers of elastic that were in it. So those little height compensating plates are helpful. And even if you don't have one and it's Sunday afternoon, just a couple, fold up a couple pieces of cardboard or something, just something to get your foot to be level is what you need. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I hope that you have a great rest of your weekend. The sunshine is out. Hopefully it's not going to rain anymore and we can enjoy the day. I have a great weekend and we will see you soon. And next week we will talk all about the things that a serger and an overlocker can do for you. Bye, everybody.